Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining our diagnostic training session today. Now, if you have any questions throughout the session, if you're joining us on Zoom, just look at the top of the bottom of your screen. Wherever your Zoom controls are, you should see a little button that says Q&A. Click on that, hit submit, and I'll get to those questions at the end. If you're watching on YouTube live, you can use the live chat function there. If you're watching after the fact on YouTube, just feel free to leave a comment, and I'll get to those questions as I can. So my name is Jason Gabrinas. I'm one of Snap-on's national diagnostic technical trainers. Been in the training department the last 11 years or so, traveling around North America, helping techs and shop owners get the most out of their diagnostic equipment. Before I did that, it was a couple years as a diagnostic sales rep with Snap-on, so I had about 30 different franchisees I worked with, as well as the shops that they serviced, in order to help everyone get the most out of their diagnostic needs. And before that, it was 8 years at Subaru, so worked in a dealership, and over time, I guess, just became that default diag guy in the shops. I always ended up with the drivability problems, the intermittent problems, the weird wiring problems that would show up on those cars. And that's really where I cut my diagnostic teeth, was trying to figure out all those weird head scratcher type cars that would come into mind. Then before that, a bunch of other miscellaneous wrenching jobs. Been a little over 25 years underhood experience for me. So our topic today, we are continuing on our OEM specific training series that we started earlier this year. We did Ford, we did Toyota, and now we're doing BMW. So this is the third in this series. And we're going to delve into a little bit of history behind the brand, the top selling vehicles, top codes that we might find, some specific issues that the vehicles might have, tales from a tech, also some specific to the make functionality that might be on the vehicle, certain components that might be on the vehicle that are specific to it. So we're going to talk all through it, and hopefully take away a few little nuggets. Now, the whole reason we do this is, maybe you work on one brand a lot. Maybe like me, when I worked in the dealership, I worked mainly on Subarus, unless got a used car come in that was off brand, but usually it was Subaru. So if I worked on a different brand, I might like to know the new whatever the weird things about that specific vehicle are, because I'll tell you what, when you work on one brand, you really learn that over time. Hey, here's the weird wacky things that happen with these vehicles. So hopefully we can give you a little bit of that information throughout these training courses. So a little bit of history on BMW. Been around for quite some time, over 100 years. Founded in 1910 by Gustav Otto Manufacturing Aircraft Engines originally. They produced their first motorcycle in 1923, started there, and then moved into automobile manufacturing 5 years later. In 1928, they started manufacturing their own motor vehicles, non-motorcycles, automobiles. Then, of course, that whole thing happened in the late 30s and mid 40s. So they were subsequently banned from manufacturing automobiles or aircraft for quite some time after that. So in order to survive, instead of doing that, they made pots, pans, and bicycles. Well, I can't make motorcycles. I can't make cars. So I guess we'll make other things made out of metal and maybe something with wheels like a bicycle. They did restart their motorcycle manufacturing just a few years later in 1948. And then they restarted making automobiles in 1952. And they have been making, of course, automobiles and motorcycles to this day. So interesting. Oh, it's always interesting to delve into a little bit of history in some of these manufacturers. So the 5 Series, the vehicles that we know today, let's talk about that. We're not talking about the older ones like the 2002s or things like that. So the vehicles as we know them today in BMW. The 5 Series was introduced in 72. The 3 Series was introduced in 75. The 6 Series was introduced in 1976. And then they introduced the 7 Series in 1978. And then throughout, let's see, I think it was late 90s. The 3 Series kind of split, and then off into the 4 Series as well. And now we have the 1 Series, the 2, we have 1 through 7 right now with all their different series. So it's definitely a lot of different models to worry about and take care of. And they also own Mini, if you didn't know that, and then Rolls-Royce as well. So they got their hands in everything from the little tiny Mini all the way up to a big old Rolls-Royce, big expensive Rolls-Royce. So they got their hands in everything. Like I said, they got motorcycles out there as well, and those are pretty technologically advanced for a motorcycle. So let's talk about a few of the top models based on sales, of course, North American sales. I know they sell them globally, but we're just For the purposes of this, we're going to talk about US and Canada sales. And this is for the last 10 years, 2013 to 2023. We got the X5 is number one with almost 600,000 sales. The X3 close behind. Then the 3 Series, 5 Series, all the way down to the 2 Series with 94,000. And that's over 10 years, right? So that's less than 10,000 a year if you do the math right. A little over 3 million vehicles. So we know prices are a little higher on them. A couple other factors that maybe might make people not want to buy them. So it's definitely not like the 8 million we've seen in some of the other manufacturers so far. So still good sales totals, and this is like I said, I came up with these the brands that I wanted to do based on North American sales. So Ford was number one domestic, and Toyota was number one Asian, and BMW in North America was number one European. So we have that. So I picked a few representative vehicles out of kind of where they hit their peaks in sales, so to say. So that would lend to believe us that it's pretty the popularity was also up there those years. So the 2017 X5 is one of them. So that is a third generation of the X5. Offered a 2-liter and 3-liter gas, a 3-liter diesel, and a 4.4-liter engine. I know maybe overseas, UK and such, they probably have more diesel engines to offer over there. They usually diesel took off a little more over there. So you might have a couple different variants over there, but by and large, at least here over in North America, they use the very similar engine packages across the line. That way it keeps it a little more simple. There's also a 2-liter turbo plug-in hybrid powertrain available that year. And everything but the hybrid has an 8-speed automatic transmission, because of course the hybrid will have a hybrid drivetrain. 2015 3 Series is another good representative in there, like a 328 somewhere in there. That is the 6th generation of the 3 Series. Had a 2-liter gas and a 2-liter diesel, also 3-liter gas engine. So very similar engines available to what we would find in the X5. Was offered an 8-speed auto transmission and also a 6-speed manual transmission. Not so many of those around anymore. And I was reading an article the other day. There's actually a fair number of vehicles out there that do offer a standard, but they're getting less and less over the years. So. And then the 2016 7 Series, we decided on this one. So that is the 6th generation of the 7 Series. Offers the 3-liter and the 4.4-liter, very much similar to that of the X5. And then also a 6-liter engine is available. 8-speed automatic transmission. This year, 2016, was the highest out of those 10 years for North America and Europe. About 13,000 sold in each market. So it is not a high seller per year. I mean, you're only selling maybe little over 1,000 vehicles a month, but I'm sure price probably has a lot to do with it too, because that's one of their higher end, higher dollar amount vehicles. So about 13,000, like I said, in North America, it's about 13,000 in Europe that year. So some common issues out there, we can get that based on data and repair orders and things like that. So many occurrences of misfires, especially on like the 3-liter engine that had a ton of misfire issues with those coils and things. EVAP issues abound. Pretty much any make that we've covered so far is going to be EVAP issues, because they're just very common, these EVAP issues on pretty much anything. Intake system issues, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, because they have a lot of proprietary technology in the intake system between variable runner intakes and valve train, different systems for valve train and stuff. So a lot more complexity lends to more failures. So we tend to see a lot of like Vanos issues and things like that. And then, looking at the data, thermostat and cooling system issues as well. So a lot of thermostat codes, other cooling system codes as well in there. So a fair amount of those you'll find. Common codes. So we took the list of the 3,000 most common codes that have shown up on our tools. And then I filtered it down to the top 10 by brand. And actually, in this case, on BMW, we only had 9. So not a ton, but you can see there is a lot of throttle, boost pressure, throttle, charge air pressure control, variable cam timing, throttle valve, mixture control, Vanos intake, variable cam timing control. So a lot of that has to do with that timing or intake issues that show up. And we see a lot of those 3 liters show up across the board there. So they also handle codes a little bit differently as well. They do what they call hex codes, so hexadecimal format. So it shows up a little bit different. There is a cross to cross them, the P codes, B codes, C codes. But as far as the vehicle presents it, and as far as the factory tool presents it, a lot of times it's either in hex code or decimal code. We can see the two different ways there. There is conversion in, like, say, Shopkey, for example, what you'd find there. Some OEM specific features. So this is going to be things that are exclusive to this manufacturer. And it's going to be a lot of that valve train control, right? So here we got the valve train for timing advance and retard. That is going to be called Vanos on the BMW system. Works very similarly to how you would see it on many other manufacturers. So the fact that they have it is not necessarily exclusive to them, but just the way that they implement it and the way that they do the oil pressure control and the solenoids and things like that. It's a little bit different than other manufacturers. There's also some special tests that we can do regarding the Vanos system as well. So that can be pretty helpful. And we'll look at that in a little bit, how we can get to that. Also, another thing that they do is Valvetronic. So the Vanos is timing advance, and Valvetronic is actually valve lift and duration. So this uses a worm gear and a motor to actually turn a cam, so to say. It's like a cam, but it's not the cam shaft, put it that way. And it can turn these little gears that then in turn also push down on a different part of the roller, and it varies how wide it can open. So we got a little animation here how that works. So we can see it's got this eccentric right here, and depending on how wide it opens it, maybe it doesn't even open the valves at all, right, in that case. And then if we go the other way, we can open them very wide or maybe a teeny tiny bit. So there's very wide all the way back to almost actually nothing. So it can really, like, infinitely variable amount that we can open the valve train on that, which is, I would say, a brilliant engineering feat, but also, like I said, there can be a fair amount of problems with them. So I guess you got to kind of take one with the other in that case. They also have two different types of variable runner intakes as well. Now, other manufacturers also have variable runner intakes, but just depending, it's slightly different on how they actuate it. So in this case, we got a straight 6, and we got these valves in here. So depending on what the RPMs are, we got two different valves. This is called a DISA, and you might hear a DISA valve named out. But depending on load, allows the torque to vary. So I get more low end torque off the line and so on and so forth. So there's multiple different ways, depending on how I open those valves, as to how that's going to run and how it scavenges it from the other cylinders here as well at different RPMs. So at low RPM, we got the longer runners here. Mid-range RPM, we kind of allow it to kind of go around through the middle here. And then at high RPM, everything's wide open just to allow it to go through. And then we also have the successor to that, which we had DISA, and now we have DIVA. So that is actually a continuously variable, infinitely variable intake. So it uses this kind of screw contraption, allows it to increase and decrease the size of the tubes and the orientation of the tubes as well in the intake. So that's kind of it's very interesting. Once again, it's interesting engineering feat, but can run into issues because we've got a lot of moving parts. So we got DIVA and we got DISA. 96 to 03 vehicles as well, you will find, especially over in North America, because they hadn't gone to full OBD2 mandatory over in Europe at that point. So about 96 to 03, you're going to find vehicles with two connectors. So you're going to have your regular 16 pin underneath the dash, and then you'll also have your round, we call it a 20 pin, underneath the hood. So in order to access different functions of the vehicle, you may need to use a different connector and maybe even some keys, depending on how the vehicle is set up. So just follow the tool. The tool will tell you either you got to use your OBD2 connector or you use the BMW 1 connector. So just in those kind of in between years, that's where we'd have to use 96 to 03. All right, let's get to our tips from a tech function here, or section. There we go. Tips from a tech section. So this is going to be, I'll speak to one or multiple different technicians who work on these or have worked on these many years in the past. or over the past many years. And say, hey, what are the weird things that you might not necessarily think of if you've never worked on this particular brand? So there's a few in here. So misfire diagnosis, as we said, misfire is ranks pretty high on some of these engines, especially that 3 liter. Here's an example, right? So the Bosch coils, they actually have a bulletin that says if you find Bosch coils in this engine, just replace them with Delphi coils. That's the bulletin. If you find any Bosch coils, they had apparently a lot of problems with them, so they just said just replace them with the Delphi. But also due to that, due to the DME logic, if it does detect a misfire, it will shut down the cylinder entirely. So if I have a misfire, in order to protect other parts of the system, it'll shut down the injector and shut down the coil. So if I'm trying to diagnose a misfire and I'm trying to see, well, is it the injector, is it the coil? And I find out, oh, well, my injector isn't firing. Hopefully you don't go down that path or, oh, it must be the injector when maybe it's not. Maybe it just, it detected a misfire and then shut that cylinder down. So we're going to shut down the injector, shut down the coil. So when I go to test it, I don't get anything there. So of course we want to check powers and grounds and all that. And then, test injectors and coils perhaps in a different way, maybe with resistance testing or something like that, because it will not fire when that happens. So that could be a challenge. All right. Also, I didn't skip one there, did I? No. Okay. Oil level measurement. So on a few years, many years, in the last few years, didn't come with dipsticks. Couldn't measure the oil. So in order to actually measure the oil, because we have to have a level sensor in the engine here. So in order to measure the oil level, you might have to go read a pin. So in this case, we got engine oil level in millimeters. 22.27 in this case. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. How many millimeters of oil are supposed to be in the pan? Not sure. But, that's just how they decided they needed to do it. Same with transmissions as well. There's really no dipsticks to speak of there either. So 22.27 millimeters in this particular case. Don't know if that's good or bad. You probably have to kind of check the spec, I guess, to see what it was. This is also demo data, so it might be a little different. Also, an electric water pump. A lot of these have an electric water pump. So there's a couple different, I don't necessarily want to say weird things, but uh, electric water pump uses these aluminum bolts. So these aluminum bolts on this water pump. And according to this tech, Sean, that I've been talking to, Sean Shaw, he works for us as a diagnostic rep. But where this ground goes is not that far from where that electric water pump is. And those aluminum bolts that it uses will also use an aluminum bolt for the ground. So if that aluminum bolt backs off and loosens up, which they are prone to do, we could have a bad ground situation. So you definitely want to inspect this ground and make sure that it's tight, because you could replace a water pump and maybe it wasn't the water pump in the first place, it was the ground. So do your electrical testing on those water pumps first before we go and condemn it. We want it because it's got a little module in there and everything. So he said where this ground is located and the bolts that they use to secure the ground, it may back off. So something to inspect there. All right, let's get to some OEM specific functions that we can do with the scan tool. And there's a fair number of them. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we have these funky systems on there as well. So engine related tests, for example, cooling system ventilation. When I replace that electric water pump, I may need to do a ventilating procedure to bleed it. Injector coding on the direct injection vehicles, we need to type in a code when we replace the injectors. And like I said, injectors can be fairly common on those. There's a starter exchange function in here. So the vehicle might not start properly if we've replaced the starter. So there's some things that need to be done in there as well as like a relearn. Startup Valvetronics. So when I replace any components in the Valvetronic system, I will need to do a startup procedure on that, which is basically a reset relearn. Valvetronic limit learn. Once again, if I do any work on the system, I have to learn the limits of positive and negative timing. And then Vano solenoid valve tests as well for the Vano systems, just to see, make sure that the solenoids are working. There's also a pretty cool timing chain test that's in there as well. It can tell you whether or not the timing chain is stretched and how many degrees it's off. So there's a lot of stuff in there. just because of all these different systems on there. You can change a bunch of different things, resets, relearn. In transmission, there's a couple different things with the gearbox, and the big one that I saw that I think would be pretty necessary and useful is oil level adjustment. When you do any work on the transmission, the oil level needs to be adjusted in there, and there's actually a functional test that you would need to do in order to do that as well. Other tests related to that starter thing, they call it a CAS relearn. So reset starter interlock, so it won't restart until you've done this function in order to relearn the starter, so to say. Initialize new headlight driver module and teach in turn indicators. So if I replace the turn signal bulb, I have to go in and I have to teach in again that I have replaced the bulb. And also in these cars, it's not necessarily exclusive to BMW, but they do have an active sound design module as well. So that's kind of like some manufacturers have been doing lately is they go in there and they'll do some sound design so you don't hear necessarily what's outside. It'll like offset what's outside the vehicle and quiets down the cabin. So I don't have to hear the wind noise. I don't have to hear the engine, even though if I'm paying that much for a BMW, I probably want to hear the engine. But there is an active sound design module on this vehicle. So, it's just all the technologically advanced stuff that these engineers do on these vehicles. It all needs stuff, different functions and tests. So let's go live on the tool and see what we can find in here. All right, let's go to my vehicle history, and I'm going to start with that 2017 X5 we talked about. So if we go into the scanner here, let's see what we can do. So if we go into, say, like the engine, tells me I'm in sim mode. As far as functional tests, right, we can go in under special functions, and there's a lot of different functions. Didn't even mention battery replacement, right, because that's not necessarily specific to BMW, but when you do replace a battery, you have to go through here. Clear adaptations, cooling system ventilation, that's where it's going to run that electric pump. Evap tank leakage diagnosis, so that forces the evap test. It actually pulls a vacuum on there. Evaluates battery state of charge, fuel consumption display, idle speed adjustment, injector coding. Once again, if I replace the injectors, I need to go there. Reset adaptation, starter exchange. That's when I change the starter out, right? I got to go in there. Startup Valvetronic system, Valvetronic limit learn, Vano solenoid valve for the exhaust, and Vano solenoid valve for the intake. So we have all these different functions just for, just for the engine. So like I said, it's a lot of complex systems sitting in there. I can also go in. Oh, let me go back to the actuator test. So in our actuator test, you can see like air duct flaps turn the coolant pump on and off. Charge pressure for the turbocharger, blow off valve, etc. Turn injectors on and off. All right, and if I go into transmission, should have that oil thing in there. Special functions, oil balancing. So there's two different things: oil balancing and oil adjustment. So oil level in the automatic gearbox can only be adjusted when following conditions are met. Let's see what it says. And then why do I need to adjust the oil level in there? Either the faults are stored, do an oil level check, the mechatronics or converters have been replaced, and parts have been replaced, not mechatronics or no converter. And then it'll walk you through a procedure based on what you did with that. Now, I think it in the sim mode, I don't think it goes all the way through it. So we're just going to skip that with that. All right. And then here's the other one. I think, was it in the... Let's do body domain, see what's in there. There's reset starter interlock, right? So we have to do that reset after we replace the starter. Only carry out this function if the CAS, FEM, or BDC has been replaced or if the vehicle is not starting. Also, this procedure may need to be executed if they've been removed from the vehicles or the vehicle's batteries become discharged. Do you want to carry out the procedure? And you would walk through with that. So that's important to be done. The vehicle will not start. Even if everything looks good, it won't send the signal to the starter. You can also put it into sleep mode, the body controller, which is helpful for doing certain testing for like a draw or something like that. All right, let's go and check real world information here. Check some SureTrack information. Now, remember how I said they didn't sell tons of these, in North America. So this is the depending on the engine, it can be very, very sparse depending on what it is. This one seems to be the most popular, the 3-liter, the X Drive. So 39,000 repair orders. Pads and rotors, that's pretty usual. Spark plugs, fairly high on the list. Valve cover gaskets, somebody said. New Level Auto commented on YouTube a little while ago. I measure the oil in a BMW by measuring how much leaked out overnight. So there you go. Top 10 is valve cover gasket. Number 1 symptom, oil leaks from engine. Noise heard from brakes. Engine doesn't start. Hey, that could be that starter interlock issue, right? Engine runs rough for a misfire. Let's see. EVAP problems. Coolant thermostat. That's number 1, way up there. Then we get into these decimal codes, right? So I can go in there. And let's see what the definition is for that. Under tips, it probably does, though. Fuel tank ventilation and scavenging air system micro leaks. So that's an EVAP code again. With that, let's see. Well, sometimes they don't cross necessarily either. All right, so that one. Let's see if we can find that one. I probably should have checked first, huh? So sometimes they don't directly cross, which you might have to do a little bit more digging into like the DTC index with that. But yeah, there's my common problems with that. A lot of EVAP issues, oxygen sensor, coolant thermostat, stuff like that. You can also kind of tell how popular the vehicle is by looking to see going through there. So let's do an X5. Well, there's only one X5, so we'll go into the engine, right? So you got the 2-liter, like 2,000 repairs, not nearly as popular an engine. And then if I go into the 4.4-liter engine, it's extra 50i. It's got a few more, right? So it just kind of depends on the engine. But we can see on this engine, on 4.4, misfire, evap. So a lot of misfires, a lot of evaps going on with that. Let's look at the cylinder 3 misfire. Let's see if this one's got the coils on it. No bulletin for the coils. All right. So that's my X5. Let's pull up the X3 or the 3 series. Sorry. Gonna have some commonalities in here with the X5 as far as engine procedures and stuff. So I got cooling system ventilation again, battery. That's going to be less specific to the vehicle. Valvetronic, Vanos, reset ADAPS, injector coating once again, solenoid valves, etc. Starter exchange there again. So very similar stuff in there. What do we got for actuator tests? The injectors, tank vent valves, electric fan, things of that nature. So a lot of different things is going to be dependent on what it's got for a body, what it's got for an engine. Let's go into my real world stuff. Pull up this one. Which one did I do? Let's do this one. So 328i, right? 48,000 repairs, pads and rotors, wheels, battery, spark plugs, headlight bulbs, coolant thermostat. What's this number 1 right here? That come up? Yeah, it does. That's a thermostat problem too. So OEM testing on that. Thermostat heater control circuit open. So that's got an electric thermostat, the map thermostat. So issues with that. And then it'll tell you, what you got to kind of look for with that. So it goes over to a PO 597 for your P codes. Like I said, sometimes they will give you that cross in there. So they get the hexadecimal, the decimal, and the P codes. All right. So that's, so top 2 are thermostat heater stuff. Actually, those cross. EVAP codes, thermostat. Like I said, a lot of electric thermostat issues on these. At least for codes, as far as codes, don't know if they necessarily have replacement issues. Well, they need to be replaced, but they do have tons of codes on them. All right, so that's going to be another thermostat code. So that is heater control circuit low. Right, so they kind of keep them bunched together. So the 1D24s kind of give you that. So once again, 48,000 repairs on that. If you change engines, which I think is actually, you got to change the model, right? So if I go like a 335i, that's going to change to a different engine. 3-liter engine, and that's once again coolant thermostat stuff, mass airflow, cylinder 4 misfire, coil problems. But only 2,500 repairs. Not a very common vehicle. That 335i with the 3-liter back then. Let's try this coil real quick, see if I get that. No, nothing on that either. So there's a certain year range where they had say, hey, replace these Bosch coils. It was our 2013 demo car had it too. Last one, let's do the 7 Series. Like I said, not a ton of these out on the road. Only sold 13,000 in North America that year, roughly 13,000 in Europe. If I go to functional tests, mostly Vanos, Valvetronic lift, determining the injectors, fuel consumption display. If I go to actuator tests, not a ton. Just because also some of them are also handed in the slave. So they have a master and a slave computer on these, the 2 engine computers on this particular engine. So you might have to look in the other engine computer depending on what it controls. And then lastly, let's look at our 750i X-Drive 4.4 liter, and then 1,700 repairs. So not a very common vehicle, probably because of how much it costs. But we got thermostats. I think that's a coolant thermostat one as well. Mass airflow, evap. And now we're down to the onesies and twosies as well. So tires, wheels, brake pads, spark plugs. AC refrigerant seems a little high. Not that we have a ton of data to go on, but AC and up is number 2. Engine overheats. So there could be some definite issues with those as you look in. Number 1, air suspension system. So they want to find information. Number 2, suspension. So maybe they have air suspension issues as well. It's always interesting to kind of try and tell and see what's going on in real world with these. All right, so that is BMW. Hopefully you picked up a few little tips and tricks and little knowledge nuggets that you didn't necessarily know about before when it comes to these cars. Well, let's talk about what we want to talk about next week. And next week has been asked for many, many times. It is a hot topic. I'm going to do my best to kind of generalize this because it changes so often, and that's usually why I tell people it's really hard to do a class on this because it changes weekly, even depending on the manufacturer, and there's weird idiosyncrasies between all the different manufacturers. So I'm going to do my best to focus on reflashing and how you can use it in your day-to-day, what it is, and what kind of tools, specific tools that we need in order to perform that. So hopefully you'll see me next week, same time, same place, every Tuesday, 6 and 9 Eastern. The 6 o'clock class also goes down to our YouTube channel like it's going right now. So it's youtube.com/SnapOnDiagnostics. All one word. Make sure you like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Really helps us out with the algorithms and allows us to continue doing this free training for you as much as we possibly can and give you as much stuff as we can for free. 9 p.m. Eastern also goes to my Facebook page. So it's facebook.com/SnapOnJason. Go check me out there if you want to use Facebook. If you want to see any of the other classes, there we go. Other classes in this series. This is class number 82 right now that we're filming. Anywhere from ADOS to functional tests through our OEM-specific training that we're doing right now. Go give me a subscribe over there. Actually, if you scan this QR code right now, it'll bring you over to the channel and subscribe you. So as long as you got it on your phone, you can always ping that and go and give it a quick subscribe. So that'd be definitely appreciated if you would. All right, let's go to check Q&A. But before I do, I also want to mention my buddy Keith, who also does free diagnostic training 2 nights a week. So on Wednesdays and Thursdays. Wednesday it's on Zeus Plus. Thursday is on Apollo and Triton tools. Pretty much the same format every time. So he's going to go through, let's set up your Wi-Fi. Let's set up your Snap-on Cloud. We'll talk about Security Link, which has been a hot topic lately as well. Then he'll walk you through code to completion on Fast Track Intelligent Diagnostics. How would I use the tool to diagnose a vehicle in my everyday use? Then that's about an hour for the first part. Then he takes about a 5-minute break. After that, he goes through and does the scope and meter and guided component test function of the tool as well. just to kind of get you familiarized with that. So one time a night, 7:30 Eastern, 6:30 Central, and that is Zoom only. So go to snapon.com/OT to register for those classes. You want to learn a little bit more about those tools. All right, let me back up here real quick, and we'll get the questions. So if you do have a question on Zoom and you got here a little late, if you go up, look at the top of the bottom of your screen, wherever that Q&A button is, you can type in your question in there, and I'll answer those when I can in a minute. And then it looks like we got a few on YouTube as well. So if you need to enter your question on Zoom, you feel free to do it now. I'm going to go look at YouTube. Let's see. Matt Eberly says, when does the new scan tool software update come out? It's going to be late March. Usually we used to do it like first week of April. But actually now recently we've been rolling it out a little early. To select people, it's usually going to be subscriptions. So if you have a subscription, you may actually get it somewhere, last 2 weeks of March, it might start showing up on your tool. The tool will just tell you when it's available. For sure, the first full week of April will definitely be available by then. And actually, I'll be doing my usual rollout classes coming up. I think like the last week of March is when I'm going to start doing those as well, 3 weeks in a row. So we'll have that information as well. NH Navi interesting says that was early on in the class. I think that was around about when we were doing the history of BMW. Let's see. Nick is saying hello from England. Welcome. Thank you for joining us every week as always. I know it's late out there. I'm a bit of a night owl too. So New Level Auto. Yep. DISA is a thing. I know there's a fairly large amount of issues with those. Let's see. Interesting. A little tidbit from Nick. So what saves BMW is the company that builds their body kits. Once Mercedes went to buy them, but the Germany government blocked it. So that's kind of interesting. A little bit of trivia from Nick over there. Brembo Joe says, hate when that happens, and that would be the when it shut down the cylinders, when I'm trying to diagnose a cylinder that's shut down. Makes it a little difficult. And as I said earlier, New Level Auto says he measures the oil in a BMW by measuring how much leaked out overnight. Good one. Nick says, thank you very much for providing free training, Snap-on. And can't wait for the next week's training. And then Lobo says, thank you very much. So thank you very much for taking your time out to spend a little bit of time with me. So with that, thank you very much for taking a little bit of time out of your day, spending a little bit of time with me. Hopefully you learned a few more little tips and tricks and differences of what makes BMW different. Hopefully the next time it comes in, maybe it won't be quite as intimidating as maybe it was prior to that. And just know they got a lot of common problems, just like everybody else. So with that, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. Hopefully I'll see you next week for reflashing. With that, enjoy the rest of your night and take care.